This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project. With your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. Hey, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman, and today we're getting into how to successfully raise money on Kickstarter. If it's your first time, if you're a newbie, I think this is going to be a great killer episode for you because we're talking with one of the veterans in the industry, Jamey Stegmaier from Stonemaier Games, who's put out a ton of great content and articles over the years on the topic of Kickstarter and crowdfunding. He's also done a few podcast episodes on this, but basically, he came on the show to share with you exactly what you got to do if you want to knock it out of the park with your campaign. Also, when it comes to the fulfillment side, we have Brandon on the line, who is the marketing head at Fulfillrite, and he's going to share a ton of great stuff when it comes to the actual how do you get this product out there to the masses? How do you successfully deliver on your rewards? So it's a really good, I think, starter episode if you have never run a campaign, or even if you have before. We're going to be sharing lots of key takeaways and tips that I think is going to be beneficial for you. So make sure that you stay around, and also, if you can, take some notes because there's a lot of great stuff that's shared in this episode, but also in my other episodes, there's tons of successful entrepreneurs, veterans, experts, and individuals, creative types that are coming to you and basically just sharing with you what you got to do, man, if you want to be successful with one of these campaigns. It is not rocket science, but it can be a little bit tricky and a little bit difficult. So my goal here with this podcast is to share with you some of the bedrock foundational information that you need going forward with one of these campaigns. And also, there are other ways that you can work with me, doing a one-on-one coaching call. That's a really common way to sort of get your ship aligned in the right direction to make sure that you're executing on the right strategy, given your type of category, given the type of product you have and your resources, all these different things. So I can tell you a little bit more about that at the end of the podcast. But another great resource out there is the Kickstarter launch formula, which I put together over many years, learning about different Kickstarter campaigns, seeing what works, what doesn't, and you can get, if you want to, grab a copy of the Kickstarter launch formula on Audible, and that's really the foundational resource that I put together for you, sort of a step-by-step system and process to successfully raise money with crowdfunding. That book, again, on Audible is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. That is crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter audio. Just go to that link. You can grab a Audible version if you'd like, and you can listen to this in the car, on the way to work, etc. Without further ado, let's get into today's podcast episode. So, man, you've really gone through a lot of experience and learning here. When it comes to Kickstarter, like I was saying, I think there's a lot of focus on the actual fundraising component and the marketing and kind of getting to like a big number. But after the campaign's finished, you fall into all of these other types of problems that you have to solve. Have you experienced any of those with your own projects or your own things that you've worked on?
Oh yeah, many. Yeah, I've encountered the range of issues, I think, across all projects. With one of the big ones being that the estimated timelines that I share with backers can sometimes end up being a little bit different than what I hoped they would be. I'm sure you guys have seen that on projects that you've backed or projects that you've run. So. That's one of the big things
that happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. And I think it also is like we all have an idea of what a fulfillment timeline is going to look like, and it's always like a little bit longer. And it can also be really awkward when you're communicating with people and backers who have supported you and trying to kind of like give them the right impression, but also making sure you're also following those promises that you made early on.
Right. Yeah. And it's it's tough because I think Kickstarter actually makes it pretty clear that you're estimating the time frame, but sometimes backers take that as a firm commitment. And I think there's a little bit of a difference there. And fortunately for most of my projects, we did deliver based on that timeline. But in times where we couldn't, that I just tried to communicate that to them on an ongoing basis. I didn't want to surprise anyone with something at the last minute. And the toughest times for me were really when I wanted to get a game, like around the holidays, really, because I know some people bought games as gifts or they wanted to share the games with their families around the holiday season. And so we're kind of approaching that time of year right now as we're recording this. And so those were a few of the projects where I really wanted to deliver like in by mid-December. And even if it gets bumped back by a week or two, that can make a big difference for backers.
How many projects would you say you've worked on, Jamey?
I've run 7 tabletop game Kickstarter projects, and since moving off of Kickstarter, I've run probably around the same number, maybe 8 to 10 like pre-orders that are a little bit different, where we go ahead and we've made the game already and we're ready to ship it to people, and then we accept the orders for the product. Mm-hmm. Even then, though, timeline still ends up, it can be a little different than what I think, depending on how many orders we get, because fulfillment centers can only ship games so fast. So I'm actually running into this right now with the Wingspan expansion, where customers want to know where their expansion is that they ordered last week, but we received like 4,000 orders in a few hours last week, which is great. It's a great problem to have, but our fulfillment center, like there are 4 people working at the fulfillment center. They can't ship 4,000 games in a week. It takes them longer than that. So just trying to communicate that to people in ways that are effective and that they actually see, because like the information is there on our website, but they don't actually always read that. Yeah.
What would you say is kind of one of the more painful or difficult learning lessons that you took away from doing these 7 other projects on Kickstarter when it comes to like that post Kickstarter phase?
I can jump in on this one.
Yeah, you jump in. Yeah.
So post-Kickstarter phase, everybody thinks about how they're going to raise the goal, and then all of a sudden you've got to actually fulfill the game or whatever else it is that you made. So the very instant the Kickstarter campaign ends, or really a little bit before then, you switch from pure marketing to pure project management. Mm-hmm. And it is so incredibly easy just to miss all the different things that have to line up in order to deliver on time. I'm talking like the timing of wire transfer payments. I'm talking like, losing a few days here or there to coordinating freight or to getting materials right, stuff like that. It's not any individual piece. It's all of them together and all the different things that can go ever so slightly off and change the timetables.
Failed credit cards, etc.
Yep.
And it can change your numbers as well, kind of like while you're trying to accomplish this thing, the numbers are changing. Maybe the manufacturing takes longer. Maybe the shipping for whatever takes longer. And it's kind of like taking all these little pieces and trying to get them to work together just to have a successful, fulfillment timeline there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think of
for the smaller campaigns, you get a little leniency on just how much those numbers can change. Because like if you have, let's say, 5% failed payments, that's more than one would normally expect. But let's say you have 5% failed payments on $10,000. That's not going to change the way you approach things all that much. If you have that happen on $1 million, that's a big enough situation where you have to have a plan for that.
Yeah, it can be terrifying, honestly, I think. And there's also the other kind of issue where if you're using another tool like BackerKit and you're trying to do add-ons and then you end up raising even more after the campaign is finished, and then you have to coordinate that with the project management of the shipping. And it's like there are all these other variables that are difficult to kind of nail down,
Mm-hmm. And BackerKit, for what it's worth, they do have the ability to lock orders, but even still, you have to figure out how you want to time that, because you don't want to lock it too early because you'll stop people from buying your extra stock or making changes they want to make. But if you wait too late, you might not have enough inventory at all.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Jamey, when you've actually been able to then get this product out there, get the board game out there to people, what is that like, getting the feedback on, the thing that you've made, and having people maybe write in or post on social media? What is that like?
Well, for me, it's a double-edged sword. Because on one side, it's flattering that people are actually playing a game that I designed or published, and that they're passionate about it enough to actually talk about it online. Like that to me is still an incredible thing for any of the games that Stonemaier Games publishes. The other side of it, though, is these games. I'm very passionate about these games too, and they're very close to my heart, whether or not I designed them. And so it can be sometimes emotionally nerve-wracking to read what people think about them. As constructive as that may be, sometimes it's purely negative, sometimes it's more constructive. And so I think I've tried to evolve. I've done my best to evolve over the years in terms of what I read, and particularly what I choose to respond to. Because my instinct early on was to, I wasn't trying to get defensive, but it would come across that way. Like someone would say, this thing doesn't work in this game, and I would explain my intent behind it, like what I intended for it to happen, how it was supposed to work. But none of that matters. Like what matters is that they had a bad experience with it, and that I need to either listen to them and try to learn from what they're saying, or not reply at all. And so I've tried to delineate between those two ever since then. That happened a lot with Euphoria, and that was back in like 2013, 2014. I've tried to learn a lot about that since then.
Would some of those things that people giving you feedback, would that inform other games that you created in the future in terms of the gameplay, or in terms of how you did fulfillment and such, or was those sort of like selective learning lessons?
It depends on the feedback, but yeah, certainly. I'm fortunate that there's a lot of chatter about some of our games online, and I try to learn to the best of my ability from those, both from a design perspective and from a production and logistics standpoint, if the feedback is there. But I also try to keep in mind that there are times where I'm asking for feedback, and that's usually during the playtesting phase for a game, and there are times when I'm not really asking for feedback. And so that when I'm asking for feedback, I know that's a point in time where I'm really receptive to it. That's when I'm actively seeking it. When anything goes, anyone can say anything, and it's a little bit different when it's just a random hodgepodge of criticism about our products. But I try my best to learn from it, and it does end up impacting our future products and expansions and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Brandon,
I found the negative feedback. Oh, sorry.
Keep going.
I found the negative feedback tends to come in basically two broad categories. There's the one that's just really genuinely constructive, and you can use it for future products, or maybe even fixing your processes right there. And then there's just, bad faith meanness. And being able to tell the difference between the two is something that has to be learned over a really, really long period of time. There's no shortcut. There's no shortcut to learning the difference between them. The constructive feedback is quite possibly the best data that you'll ever get your hands on. The other stuff you can more or less ignore, because why spend your time on the bad faith negative feedback?
Right.
Yeah, I think it'd be really hard too if it's your first project and you're really putting yourself out there very, very openly. It's very raw. It's very visceral, and it's like you're so close to this creation, but you also have to be the business owner, and you also have to be the marketing director, and all these other roles. It's really difficult to pull all that together, I think.
That's why I go out of my way so much to write for people who are doing something for the first time, because that's the time where a lot of really good potential creators quit, because it's scary, it's overwhelming, there's so much to think about and so much to do. And there's a huge difference in a lot of people's minds between never having launched anything and like massive success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. How do you think it's different doing a tabletop or doing a game on Kickstarter compared to some of these other categories? Like if you're shipping out a gadget or a gizmo, you're doing fulfillment on that project. Are there any differences specifically with a tabletop or a game as compared to these other categories? That's open for anyone.
Tabletop may actually be a little bit easier, simply because there are so many board games that come out that you can use data to figure out like what kind of games are people liking. And there's also a big community for figuring out really tricky questions like what are tariffs going to look like? What are the rules that you have to follow in order to import a game? Which manufacturer do I use? When you start talking about gadgets and just general crafts like that, I don't know if there is as large of a community. For some things, I imagine there is, maybe even a bigger community. But for some of the more idiosyncratic stuff, who knows?
And there's also things that aren't actually shipped, digital-oriented products like video game campaigns, which I feel like I've seen fewer of. I think there was a number of big ones early on, and they seemed to, many of the big ones just took way, way longer than I think they anticipated, and they ended up costing way more. So I wonder if they have just gone down in general. But I think that's another type of challenge to have when you're not actually shipping something, but you're still trying to deliver a product or deliver something to backers that they were hoping to receive.
I've seen just such a huge boom in independent tabletop creators being able to get their voice out there and being able to get their game out there, in the last 7 years. And it's like nothing I think we've seen before ever, where the touch that you have with your audience, with people who are really raving about your game, getting the feedback, being able to have people, take photos and post it on Instagram, all that kind of stuff. I think there's like a renaissance, honestly, in tabletop games, and specifically, I think Kickstarter has played a really big role in that. What are your thoughts? Oh,
no doubt.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I ran a demographics survey just the other day, and it was one of the big categories that changed from the previous year was the number of people who indicated that they're buying directly from the publisher, whether it's on Kickstarter or through their website, rather than going through. They took the biggest difference was they took that from online game stores. The data seemed to indicate that stores sales from local stores were staying the same, but people were just going directly to the publisher more and more. And I think Kickstarter is a big part of that.
Why do you think that is? Is it that people enjoy supporting creators? Is it that they want a more authentic kind of experience? Why do you think that is, Jamey?
I think there could be a few different reasons. I'm curious about Brandon's thoughts about this as well, and yours really. But I think a little part of it, a little taste of it that I saw was for a game that I published a few years ago called Charterstone. I didn't sell it directly. I only sold it through distributors, and there was no pre-order or anything like that. And I heard from quite a few people who said that they wish they could have bought it from me, whether it was on Kickstarter or some other direct manner. And I think some of that is people wanting to support the company. Some of that is maybe people wanting to get a good deal on taking an early chance on a product. And I think part of it might just be that they want. I don't know if this is actually true, but they want to guarantee that they're going to get a copy. So if they're really excited about a game, if they've been hearing about a game for a while, they may not want to risk getting it from a retailer that may not actually get it in stock for months and months. I know that's kind of an outlier situation, but that's been a feeling that I've gotten from some of our customers. They just like the guarantee of getting the game right when it comes out, and the publisher can often provide that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Brandon?
Let's see. Big reasons why crowdfunding is blown up in general?
And like tabletop in general, I think, yeah, also.
Okay. So crowdfunding in general, I think it more than ever before, any obscure niche you can think of is actually viable if you can just find like 1,000 people in this entire world who are interested in it. And board games are a really good example of that because, I mean, you've always had your monopolies, risks, all that stuff. That's been around for a really long time. But your obscure stuff has only really taken off since, well, especially this decade, but like 1995. You have to have special game stores exist. You have to have special marketplaces exist for people to even be able to satisfy that demand in the first place. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that's the internet. And I think there's also just a general renewed interest in small business, frankly, because there's a really big generational shift where pretty much like anybody under 40 or so isn't really a big fan of big companies. So they find the idea of purchasing from an individual creator or a small business kind of romantic in a way. Mm-hmm. Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Patreon, doesn't really matter where. even in the local store.
Yeah, I would add to that, and I think, it has a few things to do with it. The first is that so much, I think, of playing a game is the community around that game, and that could be a card game like Magic cards, that could be a tabletop playing Dungeons and Dragons, like etc. But so much of the community nowadays you can find easily online. You join a Facebook group. It's so simple to find other people that are passionate about the same stuff. I think that plays the community a big part of why that's happening. And I also think it's because so many of the activities have made a larger publisher, the marketing and such, it's so much easier to do now. You can do a Facebook ad for, $10 a day. And you now have the tools to be able to work with fulfillment companies, to be able to work with other people helping you out with Google ads, etc., to really actually have a marketing engine behind your mini company. And you don't need to necessarily always outsource that.
That's a good point, too. The barriers to entry have dropped a lot, too. I mean, and they keep dropping. Like, even in the last few years, a company called Freightos has come on the scene, and they let you, pick out freight the same way you'd pick out a hotel on Expedia. Stuff like that didn't exist before. You have tools like that in the hands of creators. You have these communities built on new channels, and you've got, like, latent demand that would have never been being expressed in those communities. It just makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I think also the democratization of information, having people like Jamey that are putting out really high quality blog posts, you can now learn how to do this yourself, whereas previously you don't have anywhere to read about this online. You kind of have to go and hire someone who has that knowledge or who already is working in the industry. So there's a lot less ability to do it yourself in sort of the older times.
Well, I think we're fortunate also to be in an industry, the gaming industry, where whether someone is writing a blog like I do and like Brandon does, or if they're just popping in online from time to time, people generally seem to want to help each other. Like it doesn't feel like even though it actually is a competitive environment, it does not feel competitive. And so I think that might be a differentiating factor between the gaming industry and some of the other spaces that we might see on Kickstarter or elsewhere, where at least my perception is a lot of people just want to help each other and want the rising tide raises all ships, that old saying.
It's hard to find industries as collaborative as board games. Like, the literal only thing that comes to mind is probably rap music, and that's because everybody features everybody on their track. But I'm serious. That's the only analogy I've got. Very few things like it.
Yeah, well said. Well, we've been kind of getting away from the topic, but I find this honestly really fascinating. But I kind of want to get back to some of the advice that you could impart to listeners out there who are seeing this trend of... I gotta introduce you to a killer resource, The Gadget Flow. Their website reaches more than 28 million people per month. Brands like DJI, HP, and Pioneer have used them to increase awareness and boost sales, along with more than 4,000 crowdfunding campaigns. They have a new unboxing series on YouTube where you can get your product unboxed by a tech expert. Lastly, you can get feedback for your crowdfunding campaign and increase conversions by using Crowd Insight. You can check them out at thegadgetflow.com. Being able to do this themselves, ordinary people just like you and me who can launch a project, who can get some funding, who can build off of that, who can build a small company. What are some of the lessons you would like to pass on to those people, or some of the tips when it comes to crowdfunding? Could be broad level, could be some tricks maybe that you've been noticing in the past year, or things that you've been spotting. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Either one of you can go there.
Yeah, I can go. There's an enormous amount of information on there online, and it's of mixed quality, and sometimes you don't know what's going to be good or bad until you actually try it out. So you can, because information is, like you said, democratized, you can find anything you want, but nothing will really tell you the truth, just like trying. Whether you're successful or whether you're not successful, you'll end up learning a ton that way. So it all comes back to, just get started.
I think that's great advice. Yeah, for whether you're starting a Kickstarter project, starting a company, or even just starting a blog. Someone asked me that the other day. What they asked for advice on starting a blog, and I said, well, just start it and actually write an entry today. Write a blog. Write your first entry.
Just do what I could. Write badly for a year, and then eventually things will start to click.
Right.
I do think when you have so much education, it can almost be paralyzing. Because you have so many intelligent, smart, accomplished people that still have so much fear about just putting out their creation or taking that next step. And it's really the only way that you're going to see whether or not this thing has legs, or if there is a community out there that is interested in playing or in play testing or those kinds of things. So I think that's definitely right. The only thing I would add is I see a lot of people who also put out their creation and don't think about how other people might interact with it. So being aware of, well, you think this is a great game, awesome. That's like the other side of the equation. First side is like, you're not sure if it's great. The other side is like, you think it's amazing. But being aware of how other people respond to it, where are they playing it, what do they like about it, and those kinds of things. It's kind of like almost a flexible, evolving process, getting it from idea to something that you can really put on a crowdfunding campaign.
Yeah, been there with things that don't go as you planned. When it comes to making a game or any product, you just have to start getting that in front of an audience and see if there's that real passion there. Even if it's a rough early version, you can usually see the sparks of something bigger if you've really got something going for you. What makes the difference in a lot of these really massive campaigns, and a lot of campaigns that sort of fizzle or don't get off the ground, is just simple product market fit. Like, is the game right for a very specific audience? And if the answer is yes, you can make a lot of mistakes and you'll still be okay.
Jamey, at what point did you have to transition from sort of being a one-person team to sort of building a team around yourself in order to do stuff maybe that you couldn't just alone?
I think it started pretty early. I mean, it's definitely expanded, but even from the early days, I have certain skills and experiences, but I'm not a graphic designer. I'm not an artist. So from fairly early on, I was managing a small team of freelancers, and now that team has just grown quite a bit. I still actually use the same graphic designer, but I work with a variety of artists. I now have to have an accountant. I have lawyers. I have replacement part helpers around the world. And I'd say the biggest difference from when I started to now are the number of, I call them Stonemaier ambassadors, but they're essentially volunteers, people who are passionate about my company and are willing to give a little bit of their time to play test a game, or to proofread the rules, or to just jump online and answer a rules question. And that last one is the biggest thing, because it at a certain point it did grow beyond what I could do myself to answer all the different questions that people have about our games. And I'm lucky that there are a lot of people who know the rules just as well as I know them, and they can answer those questions within seconds of someone answering or asking them.
For someone who's just getting started with their first project, do you think it's a wise choice for them to try and do it all themselves? Should they be engaging partners? What do you think is the best course of action there?
That depends on your goal. Do you want to learn a ton really quickly? Go it alone. If you want to get a project done that's really, really, really good, and you want to not take an extremely long time, definitely find a team. And if your goal is beyond just simple learning, you need to start building a team as soon as you can, even in small ways. Little bits and pieces of freelance work here and there, a couple of friends you can talk to.
Yeah, I found early on that when I was playtesting Viticulture, that which was the first game that I put on Kickstarter, that kind of started my company, that I felt bad every time I asked friends to playtest it, because the game wasn't good, and I was trying to basically taking a little bit of time from each of my friends. I was trying to make sure they had a good time and give them food and all that. But what really ended up helping was when one of those friends reached out and said, "I had a really good time doing that. I would like to do that more on an ongoing basis." And that was a big change for me, because then I didn't feel bad about asking a friend to playtest. I had someone who I knew who had opted into it and wanted to be a part of that. And Alan ended up being my business partner for the company, and that's still a big part of what he does. He's my go-to local playtester when I want to playtest a game. So that on that level, partnership has been integral to Stonemaier Games being what it is today.
I definitely think you can learn a ton when you're doing it yourself. It also, if you have a lot of energy, I think it's great, but it also can be kind of, I guess the word draining and a little bit burnout, I think, after the experience. But honestly, for your first project, I usually do recommend that people learn as much as they can themselves. and maybe with the second one with a bit wiser mindset going in, hiring out different parts or having people help you. But it's kind of yeah, like you said, Brent, it's kind of about your goals, I think, you know.
Yeah, I can actually get behind what you just said, because even though it means that the first project is likely to be hampered, I gotta say, being a jack of all trades comes in really, really, really handy when you need to show somebody how to do something, or when you need to verify the quality of work later.
Yeah.
Within the last year, one of the big, I think, realizations that I had was the importance of paid marketing with a lot of these projects. And you see a campaign that's done $1 million. In the old days, you think like, wow, that happened organically. Like it just went viral on social media, went viral with journalists writing about it. But nowadays, it's almost always coming from some form of paid marketing. And that's a massive shift, I think, within the last year, and just the professionalism around that.
Yeah, now you see $1 million campaign and you say, that's $150,000 in PPC ads on Facebook
exactly.
and Google.
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure, honestly, how that works with the board game category, because board games do seem a bit more organic in that way. What are your thoughts?
I'll just put it this way. I spent about $1,000 on Facebook advertising, and I during the last campaign, and I believe that it's brought in about 7,000 or 8,000 in revenue just from doing the Facebook advertising.
Wow.
I think it makes a big difference.
That's insane, man.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I've tried. I spent quite a bit of time and resources last year to try to figure that out, and I could not do it. I hired multiple people to try to do it, and for some reason it didn't work for us. So that's awesome that you had such a great.
I bled small amounts of money for like 2 years figuring this stuff out before he even started to remotely click. None of the guides for pay-per-click ads are really, really good. You just have to put something out there and slowly improve it over time. Mm-hmm. I had been secretly running small ads long before the campaign to see how they would respond to like the mailing list. Yeah. That's how I got it tweaked for day one.
Nice.
Was it tweaking the people you were targeting or the creative? Like, what were you tweaking there?
A lot of it was honestly just copy. Because I had been tweaking the audience slowly through doing giveaway contests for a long time. So I had figured out like the perfect kind of board gamer audience, and then it was just a matter of figuring out what would get them to click the buy now button or learn more button.
I think on my front of the marketing that I've done, it's always been trying to get better creative, get better photos, get better videos, that kind of stuff, because that's kind of like the weapons you have in your arsenal. You know, you can only do so much with changing up the copy and such, but at least from my experience, it's been trying to communicate an emotion with an image or with a video is so hard to do, but when you get it right, you know, it really pays off.
It absolutely does. And professional photography is really, really critical. If you've got the cash to spare for it, to get actual clicks on whatever it is that you're trying to get clicks on. Now, that said, in 5 years, that might be a little bit different, because I'm seeing a little of a bubbling undercurrent. Don't know what's going to happen with it, where you just get these lo-fi, casual-looking pictures on like Instagram and on videos on TikTok. So I wonder if that's going to turn into paid advertising when that audience is a little older and has a little more money. Mm-hmm. Time will tell.
I think someone did a guest blog post on my blog about Facebook ads, and they had a similar observation where they tested like very clean digital images of the game versus like a photo taken with their phone, and the photo taken with their phone did better than the very clean, perfect image. So I wonder if we'll see the next evolution will be that could be what you just said, like even rougher photos that aren't perfect and aren't super polished, maybe.
Yeah, but it's got to be unpolished in the right way. I feel like this is so hard to put. It's like you know, like a men's fashion magazine where they got a guy will have his sleeves like halfway rolled up or something, and like one button will be unbuttoned. It's got to be like that. It's the hardest thing to define.
Yeah, I'm definitely not reading those magazines given my fashion. But
No, I saw a whole article about like somebody trying to explain to him, like, I still don't get this, but I believe it.
I think so too. Like even like you watch YouTube ads, and you can tell so many of these ads seem like they're just kind of filmed off the cuff. Someone holding a smartphone and like walking through their home. It seems so natural, but it's so planned out. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting to me how almost this like organic feel is actually what does very well with marketing, whereas something that's super polished, almost just like you don't even notice it anymore.
Yeah.
I do think there's also a lot to be said for honestly just having a great product that people are willing to rally around. Being able to build that I guess you would say the community. Do you have any thoughts on that and ways to encourage a community that forms around your project? Is it being vocal yourself? Is it asking questions? Are there any things you can do to get a community to form around you?
Yeah, there are quite a few things. I have a whole section of my blog about how to build a crowd, and a lot of mine is like relationship-driven marketing, like trying to have genuine connections with people, which takes a lot of time and effort, but I think in the long run it can pay off. There's also, that's my preferred method, but I know sometimes people show up at my blog and they're ready to launch their project in 2 weeks, and those methods don't work in 2 weeks. They take a lot of time and effort.
When it comes to community building, there's basically two ways you can do it, and there's the fast and the slow. And the slow is really, really, really so much better. Just actually talking to people, asking questions, getting to know them, figuring out what they like. You can't. Nobody can replace that. No company can fake that. No AI yet can do that. And then I guess if you are really, really in a hurry and you need to get a lot of eyeballs on something quick, you can try to make something buzzy or viral, or you can give something away for free. But I mean, there's not really a lot of ways to build a community really, really quickly.
Yeah, I have to agree. Yeah, the only thing I would say there is that there are ways to, I think, implement tools that let you grow it faster, but it's always going to be, you can't. It's not something you can just have a relationship over the course of a week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I've had a lot of luck just asking questions on Facebook and seeing what people say. Mm-hmm. Like I'll even schedule them out when I don't have time throughout the day, just see what happens. And I found that to be shockingly effective. Just ask people about their interests.
I really love that you said that, Brandon, because I think there's a big difference between just broadcasting information and asking anything. It's something that I tried to do on project updates on Kickstarter. I'm sharing a lot of information. That's most of why people are there. But I'd always try to end with a question, and that really invited engagement in a way that on the post where I forgot to write the question, the engagement went so far down.
Yeah, it's just kind of like at the end of the day, people are interested in reading to a degree, but they also want to share themselves. And it's like together, as you're sharing really cool stuff or you're sharing your own experiences, that's really where the community comes out of it. Or even like you talked about, Jamey, some of those evangelists being willing to answer questions on your behalf. Like that's kind of cool that you almost get in a sense of authority when you can answer someone's question like that and also help them out. It feels nice, in getting those people to participate. Well, I want to make sure, while I have you two here, that for those in the audience that this is really their first project, that we get all of the things that you'd like to pass on. So I guess one of my final questions here is there anything else you'd like to communicate to that person who they're really hesitant, they're really scared, they don't know they're not really sure what they're doing, but this is their first project, they're committed to doing it. What kind of advice would you give to them?
I'll just say I have seen I've had a project go sideways, and it's not as bad as you think. Like worst case scenario is really not as bad as you think. Even if you totally screw something up, you can still get a lot of attention. You can get a lot of lessons from it, and you can move on and you can make something better later. And that is still better than doing nothing.
So make sure you take action, make sure you take a risk. Anything you would add to that?
I'll add two quick things. One, if someone is listening to this and they are scared and they are nervous, I think that's actually a good thing. I think it's good if they're excited as well and if they feel confident. But I think those nerves will get you pretty far. Like whenever I was putting together project pages, I would look at them every day, and I would find some typo every day, something that I'd messed up or that wasn't as clear or wasn't as succinct. And I think that's a good thing to feel going into a project. And the other thing on a more logistical side, to someone listening who's in those shoes, make sure you have a budget. I know that's a very technical thing, but make sure you've really budgeted this out, because I think that's the one, like what Brandon said, it's really not going to be that bad if things go south. I think that's the one possibility of things that could go really bad if you have not budgeted properly and haven't planned for a few different funding scenarios. So hopefully you spend a few minutes with a spreadsheet and put a budget together with the help of all the different people who are like the fulfillment centers, the production, the publishing, the manufacturers, and things like that. So you have an idea of how much you might be spending if things barely fund or if they wildly overfund.
I think the biggest. You can go.
Sorry. The biggest financial risk is massively overfunding and underestimating your per unit cost by an amount that is enough to seriously hurt you.
Yeah.
That, I suppose, is the only really, really, really dangerous thing that can happen.
Yeah.
The only other thing I would add to that is that there are so many creators that I've spoken with that have just shot a message to another creator in their space or similar, asking for some feedback or asking for some advice. And sometimes those messages go unanswered, but a lot of the times people are willing to just share some tips or to share what they think they could be doing better. And this is an incredible community for that, I think. And people are so nice to be willing to do that. But just doing that, and I don't know if that's a mentor or just being willing to ask for some help and some feedback is always something that can really, I think, put your project on the right track. But thank you guys so much for coming on the show, and I really appreciate you dropping some knowledge bombs here, and also your own experience, which is really hard won over many years, sharing that with the audience. I think they're really going to appreciate that.
Thank you. And I might add to that a little bit, that if you are reaching out to a creator to ask them for advice, which is something that I did before I launched Viticulture, the one thing I think I would have done differently that I would recommend that people do is try to find, and this may just be me, Brandon, you can let me know what you think about this, but try to ask it in a public forum. You can target a specific person that you want advice from, but if you ask in the public forum, I think that shows kind of a generosity of spirit, because you're saying, okay, I don't want to keep this information just for myself that I'm asking. I am asking in a public way. I'm being vulnerable here. I'm asking this vulnerable question for the people, and other people can see it because I'm asking it publicly, so other people might be able to learn from it. That, to me, that always resonates with me when someone does that.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Another thing I found really effective is if you want to just reach out to somebody who you've never met and you just need something to say, just offer to write a guest post.
Oh yeah,
it's it's one of the easiest ends.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, it's also a great way to develop a relationship with that person, like you said, and also to put some of your content, the things you've probably not even aware of that you've learned as a creator or as a if you've done another campaign, putting that kind of knowledge into the world is always, I think, something that helps other people. So I like that kind of karmic thing that we got going on there. But guys, thank you so much for coming on, and I really appreciate you and your time and sharing all of these lessons that you've learned.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having us on.
Shipping and mailing from your desk has never been simpler than with SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes. With SendPro Online, it's just click, send, and save for as low as $4.99. That's $4.99 a month. Schedule package pickups and track shipments from departure to arrival. And for being a CrowdCrux listener, you'll receive a free 30-day trial to get started and a free 10-pound scale to ensure that you'll never overpay. Just go to pb.com/CrowdCrux to access this special offer for a free 30-day trial plus a free 10-pound scale to get started. That's pb.com/CrowdCrux to experience shipping made simple with a free trial of SendPro Online from Pitney Bowes. Hey, thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. Hope you took away tons of great education and tips and hopefully some resources going forward that you can apply to your campaign and you can be more successful. That is my goal, is to try and help you run a successful crowdfunding campaign. If you would like to work one-on-one with me, you'd like me to go over your entire campaign, your strategy, give you feedback, and really get, I think, a strong sense of what you got to do going forward to really knock it out of the park with your project, you can go to crowdcrux.com/coaching and book a one-on-one coaching call with me. That is crowdcrux.com/coaching. This is kind of the next step, if you will, after you've done a little bit of learning on your own and you're kind of ready to now get this all squared away. You'd like to learn about some of the other people maybe you can work with, some of the resources, my thoughts on agencies, all these different things. crowdcrux.com/coaching. Hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. Go and check out some of the other ones we got in the archives, and I'll see you next time.